All right. Well, we still have people streaming in, but I think we'll get started. In deference to fact, we have a limited amount of time. So I want to start by saying good afternoon to everybody. And I wanted to welcome you. For those of you who don't know, I'm Tom Schreier, and I'm pleased to be the director of this Inspiring Conversation series and the founding director of the Inspired Leadership Initiative here at Notre Dame. It is our program for those who have completed their chosen career and look to return to campus for an academic year to discover, discern, and design their next act. I want to also thank you for participating in this installment of Inspiring Conversations, where we're spending the semester discussing leading people in an ever-changing world. We continue to be humbled by the amount of interest in this program. We now have well over 900 participants, ranging from our ILI fellows to alumni to faculty, students, and friends that have registered to join us throughout this semester. We're also excited to share you that this community is not just domestic, but has over 26 countries from around the world represented. And we've designed today's conversation to have as much engagement as possible, facilitated by having a live Q&A session later. Before we start, I also want to thank our partners in the Alumni Association for all of the thought and work and energy that they put into this platform, ThinkND, which is, of course, Notre Dame's online learning community. Now, just a couple of quick technical issues before we dive in. You're all muted by the host to facilitate a smooth program without background noise. And later in the program, we'll have a Q&A session. This is going to be facilitated by you submitting questions for our guest through the Google form, which is being shared with you now via the chat function. Please do submit questions. It's one of the most enjoyable parts of this entire session when we have an opportunity to hear from you what you'd love to learn from our speaker. And lastly, we'd recommend that you use the speaker view in Zoom, as that will highlight our speakers as they come on screen. This week, it is truly an honor for me to welcome to the session Louis King, who I've had the pleasure of knowing and working with for many years. Louis is the president and CEO of Summit Academy, and his favorite quote, which I love, is "the best social service program in the world is a job." In addition to his transformative work at Summit Academy and in the surrounding community, he has also served as a member of the Minneapolis School Board and the Seed Academy Board and others, including serving on the board of Allina Health, where we had the great pleasure of working together with an earlier Inspiring Conversations guest, Dr. Penny Wheeler. Louis is an Army veteran, where he rose to the rank of major, and he's translated his leadership into being a major influence and voice in a community that, as all of you know, has been rocked by the murder of George Floyd and continuing racial inequities. It is a true pleasure and a privilege to welcome you, Louis, to Inspiring Conversations.
Well, I thank you, Tom, and I want to publicly express my gratitude to you for the impact that you've had on my life. And you're really an example of what I believe is needed in order for our country to move forward. There was a guy when I was in high school, Irwin Shaw, who wrote a book, Rich Man, Poor Man, but he had another one called Nightworks. It was about a guy who found a bag of money and took it and ran, and basically met people who changed their lives. And because of you, I've gotten to serve on the St. Thomas Academy board and meet people and see how that institution function and contribute. And now Allina, which is a huge endeavor, and again here today. So thank you very much. And I want to thank all of you for tuning in today. As someone would say, I'm a poor country boy, just trying to make it in the world. But this has been a very good ride, and I am having a blast. A little bit about me. I grew up in Jacksonville, Florida. I went to an all-Black high school with 2,000 kids. I lived in a community that, if you might not be familiar with Minneapolis, but nothing but Black homeowners. And they were working class people, and they had families. I was born in 1960, by the way. And I also lived in the housing projects. I worked in tomato fields. I went to Morehouse College, where the professor would say, close the book, let's talk about what that means to Black folks. And there I discovered the Black middle class. I didn't know I was poor until I met the young guys with the Corvettes and the 280Zs and even an airplane. And they took me in and taught me their value system, which is how I moved from the poverty mindset to that of the middle class. And to this day, because of Zoom, me and those fellows are still tight. I was in a professional soldier for 10 years, and it's the greatest privilege on the planet um, to lead American soldiers. It was a blast. I traveled the United States. I lived in Europe. And I came here to teach at ROTC for 3 years in 1989. And like Gilligan, I never left the island. When I got here, I didn't know what a nonprofit was. I had no idea my boys club was a nonprofit. I discovered, and by the way, when I got to Minneapolis, I looked around and said, so most people die and go to heaven or hell. This is where white people go when they die. Never seen a place so white. And I found a small Black community and immediately discovered that there was a nonprofit on every corner, which I didn't understand. I had the feeling that, if community is to be healthy, adults must work and children must learn. In the Army, men have 100% employment, healthcare, housing, and discipline. And as the commander, it was my responsibility to see to their health and welfare. And so these principles are fairly straightforward, no matter where you are. So Tom asked me today to speak to the what is the future need for equality? Um, why is it necessary to have a strong middle class? How to lead in times of trouble, and this theory I have about the tech migration. And when I get there, I'll talk to you about my work with Summit. So the first thing I would tell you, if you hadn't noticed, that I'm African American, Black. I've been redefined several times. I was born colored, Negro. I do reject BIPOC. I think that tries to cloud the epic journey of my people in this country, and we have a special relationship, and we can't ever lose sight of that. So I'll never use that term to refer to my people and to the work that I do. I would also add that I am a patriot, period, without qualification. I've seen oppression in all corners of the world. We simply have our own um, version of it here, and one of our first struggles is accepting it and just saying, hey, it is what it is, and then moving on from there. So let's talk about what's needed for equality in the future. As a professional Army officer, you study the history of war and generals and how things happen. Why? Because the terrain does not change and the habits and hearts of men don't change. Essentially, the only thing that changes is technology, and therefore the strategies and tactics change. So the cavalry had horses, then they got tanks, then they got helicopters, and who knows what, they'll probably have jetpacks in the future, but there's still the Cav capable of shock and awe, and there's still principles that apply. And that moves across all types of things. So I'm going to walk you briefly through the epic journey of African Americans in this country, because you must have that historical context, because these things happen. They are facts. They're not up for debate, whether it's good or bad. History is already written that. We got here in 1619 and were emancipated in 1865, 245 years. So first thing is, that was stolen labor. There's no other way to put it. Stolen labor. So just do the math and on what that's worth, put it to the side and move forward. Then you had Reconstruction, and then the next major event, which is overshadowed a lot and ignored, is the Great Migration. where, and this was roughly 50 years after emancipation when it began, where droves of Black folks left the South. Now, think about it. The South had been decimated. Someone thought it was a good idea to succeed from the Union, and we proved to them that was not quite right. The their land, their infrastructure destroyed, the young men killed off, and that is a devastating blow. You could see what had happened in Germany by the time I got there. Holes in the population where the men had been killed off. And then 50 years later, a massive exodus of labor to the north. Major event, major event. 50 years later, interestingly enough, 1965, all the voting rights stuff passes, right? Now, for those of us who live in a microwavable world, think about this 245 years of slavery, then 100 years where you can't vote and segregation. If you can't vote, then you can't make laws. And in a capitalist society, the influence on laws is through the vote. And so you're on the sideline. So we got another 100 years where it's been taken. And now we're 50 years into the current operation. I also point out to people two facts that they need to understand. One, Brown v. Topeka, Kansas was 1954 that says separate but equal could not apply in the land to achieve equality. But it took 11 years to get the rest of the laws passed. So my point is the things that you see occurring today, we should view them as more the beginning than the end. And you know, we're sitting here now with our remote controls and microwaves and internet and the attention span of a gnat. And we typically want things to happen right now in this news cycle. That's not how things occur. It does take time. And when you're looking at a 345-year journey, I mean, 10 years is nothing. And so I view it in that context. And I'm excited about building relationships and institutions that will carry into the next 250 years. And if you ask me, why do I say that? It's because my college was built in 1867, 2 years after emancipation, because they knew that they would need leaders like me to be present someday to set it up for the next 100 years. So we now find ourselves on the precipice of a new journey with a new awakening, with new technology and communication skills and communications devices that will accelerate it. But I do feel that when you're young, you think that everything's going to happen right now. I've now accepted the fact that much like the slave who realized that he would never be free, but he kept trying to run, or the man who understood that he would never vote, but he would still go down there and try. And I see this economic apartheid, which currently exists. I might not see the end of it, but my job is to build the institutions that are needed to take it down the way that the others have been taken down. And the other thing I will say, actually, two more points on this. Don't feel sorry for us, for Black folks. We're winning. We won the last two fights. The Civil War, our cause won the Civil War and the Civil Rights Movement, and we will win this one too. The final thing I'll conclude with, I think Jared Kushner did us a favor yesterday. He made this comment that had people rocking when he said, Black people have to want to succeed. And, you know, there's a side of me that looked at him and went, you can't even walk in my shoes or the people that I know or who trained me. But I'm glad you said that out loud because what you're trying to do is forget the rich history of this country and the fact that we've always had friends who've helped us along our epic journey. Thank you for saying that because I can remind you of our successes and everything that has taken over the last 345 years and ensure you that my grandboys who I'm teaching what I know right now will pick up the baton and continue our march to glory in this country. So why is a strong middle class important, a Black middle class. In Minneapolis, we do not have an indigenous Black middle class. People here are imports brought in by the Fortune 500s. I was brought in by the military. You simply do not see them producing a middle class in this town. And I made it my mission to help grow that middle class. Very important. Whether it's from Marie Antoinette and the French Revolution, where the bourgeoisie and the proletariat come together, abolitionists who owned farms and had means to help runaway slaves, or the Montgomery bus boycott, which lasted for a year, where the Black middle class had cars and did the carpools for the poor people. The middle class have disposable time, disposable money, and political efficacy. They believe that they have power. And when you believe you have power and you act with power, you exercise power. Politicians, for the most part, are weasels and are looking for popularity. And if you show up in mass and say things long enough, they're going to come and make that speech in front of you. And then you have to turn it into policy. So I think that we have to have a middle class in order for progress to be made. If not, you'll have a continuous cycle of the misery management machine where the county, welfare, the underworld, the police, the courts, everybody making money, nonprofits, everybody's making money off poor people and things never change. And that's where we are now. And even with Barack Obama, he never talked about poor people. Everybody lies and says in America that everyone's the middle class, when that's simply not true. There are poor white people, poor Black people, there are poor people, period. But we don't like to acknowledge that in this country. And now the thing that's affecting Black folks after the bondage and the stolen labor, after the voter suppression, is now economics. And that's a very hard truth. That's a very hard truth for white America to face, but friends tell friends hard truths. If you, again, look to the past, you can say, well, all that's behind us now. Absolutely. But those things set up today's conditions. And as you see on television every day now, and I'm so glad they come out into the open, because in any battle, what you want to do is draw the opposition out into the open in the middle of the battlefield so you can fix them and destroy them. And so, but when they hide, you can't get to them. And so now you hear it on television every day as people talk about the suburbs. As you can tell from the tractor behind me, I probably don't live on a city block. Okay, we are everywhere. This country has people in all walks of it. And where we are today is to ensure that people have the education, the skills, and the social networks needed to enter the middle class. And some folks operate from a position of scarcity, assuming that we don't have enough room for everybody. Now, how do we lead through times like this? We have our normal business cycle of recessions and just day-to-day stuff, right? Then you get hit with COVID. A basic microbe has brought the world to a standstill, essentially. Um, and then you get the George Floyd murder, which kind of now turns this thing to another notch. So let's first deal with the microbe. Any of you who were soldiers back in the Cold War days, we had a term called NBC, a nuclear, biological, and chemical, right? And essentially, the first rule is dispersion, protection, detection, and action. So we have to understand that we are under a tremendous two-pronged attack. One, a public health issue, and the other, an economic issue. That's a reality, and leaders get paid to manage those things and balance them. And you gotta, it's not either or, it's both. And you're gonna take risks on both sides, and you're gonna have tactics and strategies that fail and some succeed. But the main thing is you got to be square up with people. You can't play them. Business people have everything on the line with their businesses, but I can't come to your business if it's going to spread the virus. All right, we can't open the economy if we're still glowing at night. So the public health thing is a priority. That's the protecting the force. First rule of the game. Make sure the soldier changes socks. Make sure they got the equipment they need. Make sure they got the protective gear they need. Don't expose them to unnecessary threats, or you will not have a workforce. You will not have any businesses. You will constantly have a cycle. Um, and the American ingenuity to produce vaccines and treatments, we stack up against anybody on the planet or in the universe. So you get to going on that real fast and you count on your folks. That then brings us to so I told my people we would first take a protective measure, get all of our stuff together, look around, look for opportunities, and then move out. We're not going to sit there and let this thing keep us. Stay protected and only move as much or as fast as you can in a safe manner. So as you can see, I have given up my digs in the close suburbs. I now live in a place in parts unknown in an undisclosed location. My favorite thing is to tell people to stay away from me. I am one of those people with the underlying conditions. Wouldn't look good in a casket. Nobody can come to the funeral. So now that brings us to the social unrest. You know, we do have to recognize a couple of things. One, that the American society of the economic apartheid has worked to create these, has been successful in creating these ghettos. And inside the ghetto, you have a phenomena that everybody kind of overlooks. It's the emergence of the gangster class and the drug culture and the violence that comes along with it. And basically, our culture got overrun when they took away the temptations and gave us 50 Cent and redefined what it meant to be black. And the black middle class moved out, and I was guilty of that too. And it left the poor people in the drug class. Now, why is this important? Because it then gave white America the license to have the police get the license to treat all black folks the same as if they're criminals. Therefore, George Floyd. I mean, this happens every day. It was just that this time, this guy went too far in front of a million people with cell phones, and you couldn't debate it. It happened. He had his knee on his neck until he stopped breathing. Now, some weasel lawyer is going to come around and try to say things and all that. But look, folks, this happened and it's intolerable. The violence that ensued was not right at all. I believe in order and discipline, but it's always right beneath the surface. And I don't necessarily subscribe to Black Lives Matter because they take no position on the crime in the neighborhood. They only show up when the police are doing their thing, but so be it. That's their role. And I think that we have to understand that this forces us to answer some hard truths. One, slavery used to keep black people in check with chains. Then came the Klan, and now the police. So the oppression has evolved. So we will now have the opportunity to deal with how police our communities. And I am about to help de-elect city council people in this town who said defund the police, which was absolutely insane, and they got to go. But you can't show up killing my people, and you can't show up beating up on boys and doing that kind of dirt. We're not having it anymore, and everyone needs to understand that. And I'll end with this. If we understand that we've always had challenges, And if we understand that enough of us came together to make a difference. And now notice what I say, enough. I don't need everybody. I don't try to convince people to join me. I'm looking for seekers. I'm looking for people who want to be part of the victory that is certain if you look at history. I'm looking for people who understand that this might be another 150, 250 years, but that's okay. Our responsibility is to build relationships and institutions that take the fight into the future. That then brings me to the tech migration and opportunity and where I see the fight now, um, what I've worked to build, and what I ask other people to look at as a means of dealing with the current apartheid. As I mentioned earlier, the Great Migration afforded opportunities for folks to go forward and get jobs in the North as we move from agrarian to manufacturing. Today, we are moving from manufacturing to tech. Look at this call. Look, this didn't exist a year ago. I mean, COVID just did it to us, and it takes all kinds of people and jobs that didn't exist to make this go forward, to order your food online, all those things that are emerging. We still, and the boomers are still moving towards glory. You know, we're not going to live forever. So here's an opportunity for poor people to get the education, skills, and relationships needed to become part of this new um, tech world and be the leaders there and produce middle class jobs without 4 year degrees. You can do a lot of it with certifications, and then you can go on and get the advanced degrees and go forward. At Summit, we offer 20-week training programs, no out of pocket costs. I can move them from $10 an hour to 17 bucks an hour, $35,000 a year in 20 weeks. We have partnerships with businesses. It is an immersion process. You got to come and live with us. We help you change your life because you build new relationships, get new skills, and we attach you to our friends in companies in the Fortune 500 companies, formerly construction, and now more and more tech companies like Ameriprise, U.S. Bank. We're bringing in a Palo Alto Cybersecurity Academy, and we're very excited about where we're headed. Bring in 2,000 people a year, produce 1,000, and have those people then bring others. And then I call it the ant trail. If one ant shows up and finds a cube of sugar, you come back 30 minutes later, they got all the ants in the world. And that's what we're doing at Summit, where we believe, as Tom said, the best social service program in the world is a job. That's my story.
You know, Louis, no matter how many times I hear the story, it's still an incredibly powerful story. And I've had the great pleasure in a number of different venues of having the opportunity to hear the story. Just a couple of things to maybe flesh out a couple of things that you said. One is you have a great admiration, I think, for great leaders. And one that you mentioned to me in a conversation is David Petraeus and his leadership style and an element of that you admired. Can you just flesh that out a little bit for the benefit of the audience?
Certainly. Everyone wants to know about what to do and what do you do now, right? Given the George Floyd thing, violence in the Black community, the police and all. And I said, well, hey, listen, anytime men don't work, they're dangerous. Whether that's Mogadishu or Afghanistan or Syria or Iran or Iraq. And David Petraeus is noted as a brilliant warfighter. Well, he wasn't our fiercest general, but he was very smart. He opened the marketplaces in his sector and put people back to work. And therefore, he had the least amount of violence in his sector. The other thing that he did was he wouldn't come to your house at 3 a.m. kicking your door in front of your wife and children. I mean, he would show up and say, hey, listen, we want to talk to you. And could you meet us at the police station tomorrow at 5 o'clock? Because if he understood that if he kicked in the door, then the man got to go plant a roadside bomb to get his dignity back. All right. Versus come by tomorrow. Can you come down? Can you come down tomorrow at 5? What are you gonna do? Run away? I mean, come on. And we can apply that to the inner city, to the suburbs. I tell people there's nothing special about people in the suburbs except that every day two garage doors go up and two cars go out versus in the inner city it is simply not there.
So another thing, Louis, that just to talk a little bit about more about kind of the influence that you've had in terms of kind of how buildings are built, stadiums are built, other things in the Minneapolis market, and the kind of relationships that you've forged with people. Can you just talk about how you were able to do that? You know, these weren't people you knew when you walked into Minneapolis. These are people you forged relationships with. I've seen those relationships. I've seen the power of it. Can you talk about how you developed those relationships?
Certainly. The first thing is I take leadership seriously. And if I get involved in something, then I try to have a concrete plan. I'm really clear about with people about what is success and what role would I like them to play, which means that they can choose. And if they say no, it's thank you very much. Have a wonderful day. By the way, do you know anyone who might be interested? And I keep moving. The other thing I did was I never played, you never heard me talk about racism, right? The race card, because I understood that racism is a cloak for greed and the economics behind it all. And I focus on the money. And then the third thing that I did was seize upon opportunities that already existed, like, oh, you say the participation goals for this $1 billion contracts 30%. Let's talk about how we're going to meet that and how you hiring my people is going to position you in the marketplace because people who give those contracts want to get the biggest bang for their buck. Sure, it's great that you make a dollar, but if you make a dollar and leave everybody out, then we got to pay to deal with those people through welfare, philanthropy, and the police. So how about living up to your contract and spreading those dollars around? So I found the owners of the projects, the developers of the projects. Today, I'm trying to begin the efforts for a WPA style initiative here in the city in order to deal with the unprecedented violence to get those young men out the corners. You have to go to the owners, the people who have control, and say to them, this is in all of our best interests. And 9 out of 10 of them, Tom, respond very well, and everybody plays ball.
So when you first had the vision for Summit Academy, talk just a little bit. You know, you've talked about your personal history, but I think there's also a really cool story behind how the seed of an idea became Summit Academy, and then you also merged with another entity to form the enterprise that's there today. Talk a little bit about how all of that came about and what motivated that for you, Louis.
Well, it's really funny. You know, you hear these guys go, they struck a deal with God. So I was an artillery commander and I was sitting on a fire point one day in Grafenberg, Germany, and the rockets didn't quite go where they were supposed to. And I remember when my antiperspirant quit working, man. And I said, if you get me out of this, I'll do good. That was February of 1989. I got here, I vacationed in Berlin for Labor Day. Got here October 1st, and of course, by mid-November, the Berlin Wall was down. I resigned my commission in 92, and by then I looked around, there was a group called Two or More, building, painting the houses of the elderly and handicapped, putting kids to work. I went, okay, this is the place to go. I ran for school board, got elected 4 years, said, oh no, elected life isn't for me. But as I looked at the kids working, and I said this to a guy this morning, children's jobs don't replace working adults. And so this guy, Harry Davis, called me up to come maybe be the interim executive director of the place called TCOIC. And I was like, no, I'm happy with the team I got. been there, done that on interim gigs, won't work for me. He said, well, how about a merger? Now, mind you, this was 1995 before nonprofit mergers were in vogue. And I said, yes. So we took a $200,000 house painting project, merged it with a dime $1 million budget deal. It was an OIC with Leon Sullivan, founded in the 60s. And today, after what has clearly been my lifetime work, we're about 11 million bucks, enjoying a very diversified budget and putting close to 800 people to work per year. I'm really proud of the work that we do.
And you touched on it in your history, but what I love is you also do respond to the changes that happen in the market and environment, right? You said this great line to me when we talked earlier. You said, the world has changed mightily from the days of the landline. And I'm sure your business has had to change too. And you're talking about and developing the STEM district. You talked about some elements of that, but what's your vision for this STEM district, and what motivates you to want to create that kind of a district in that environment?
Certainly. And if you consider the fact that you have to fight with the hand that you've been dealt, all right? So infrastructure is always there. They always invest in infrastructure. Construction is family friendly. I could go for that. Now with a tech explosion, we made a deliberate pivot there to get people into it, but you need to focus on the workers of today. If you want to accomplish this, you must focus on the workers of today, tomorrow, and the future. The workers of today are the adults. The workers of tomorrow, seventh graders. That's how when I did interviews for kids going to military academies, somebody put it on their mind about the seventh grade. You don't wake up as a senior in high school and decide to go to Annapolis. And then you got to have the workers of the future. In Minnesota, we put them in skates early for hockey. And so we're going to have these people moving into tech. You got to introduce it to them at all 3 points. The adults are important because they are first adopters. They put food on the tables. They will teach the mores and values, and they will bring others in. If we built a Ford plant in the middle of North Minneapolis, the violence would go away. Absent a Ford plant, we put in a STEM district, which has mobile learning labs, mobile pods, and innovation center, mobile innovation lab, Best Buy, Team Tech Center. You build all of these little things, these little vignettes, and I call it the Disney World of opportunity. There's something there for adults and children, and over time, it will be seen as a place of hope and a place to get the skills, education, relationships needed to enter the middle class.
So we got a number of questions coming in from the audience, and so let me just focus on a couple of them. One from Atun here in Minnesota, and he first of all thanks you for sharing this history with many on the call who aren't familiar with kind of the broader history of the Black population and your history as well. But his question is, when lives are not microwavable, how do you sustain hope and inspiration in this unprecedented period?
One, history is very important. I always tell folks, the last time I did this gig, we were running Underground Railroad. We didn't have GPS. We didn't have, cell phones. Imagine Harriet Tubman, right? She helped personally 70 people, not a million, 70 people. But she inspired a lot because of her figure. You got to be bigger than life sometimes, staying close to the light bulb and cast a big shadow. But tell people, listen, we're okay as long as we keep our eyes focused on the objective. Here's your role in it, and understand it's like climbing a mountain. It may not seem that you're making progress, but when you look back, the village is getting smaller and smaller. So keep them focused, keep them grounded in the past, and take good care of them. They'll be all right.
So then we have a question from Richard in Missouri. He said his question is, You referred to the misery cycle, or the cycle in which industry, nonprofits, governments, for-profits, all profit in one way or another on the current state of poverty. How do we break that cycle so that the establishment, to really kind of challenge the establishment in that embedded group?
So it's the misery management machine, okay? So the misery management machine, if you will, is the modern day plantation. You got to look at that, right? And it lives because of the deprivation of opportunity. The way to fight it is to provide opportunity. All right, that's it. Um, you will not defeat the unions who are tied up in the jobs, the social workers, the elected officials. There are people who would rather build homeless shelters than ensure that everybody has a home because they can actually go out and earn a living. That is not their thing. There are people who are in those businesses. There are grants writers who write, we deal with the worst of the worst, and only we can do it. And the work is getting worse, and you need to send more money. That's their job. That's their job, and they're very powerful. So the only way to beat that is to create opportunity. And then and I'm speaking now for Black folks, right? When I can tell you where to get a job and where some skills versus where to go to the clothing shelf, the food shelf, or the homeless shelter, then that's when we beat it. And then that's when people make those demands as they enter the middle class and choose to, we have the worst elected officials in the poor neighborhoods. Absolutely ridiculous. And so they will then begin to get the representation that gets them a piece of the pie. We, the people, have all the power that is needed to get this done. Politicians will not do this for us. They never have, they never will. Nonprofits cannot do it for us. I told the CEOs of the top 50 Fortune 500 companies in the state of Minnesota, we lead with philanthropy. We also lead with disparities. That should tell you something. Philanthropy is not the way out of this struggle.
So a question from Vicki, who's in Maine. She was one of our fellows in our program, and she would like to know how many graduates you've had from Summit Academy, and have you worked with other people in other cities to help to replicate this successful model?
So, I could grab a number from you, but let's just say right now we're up to 700-800 people a year. And also, here's the other beauty too, and I'm trying to get to 1,000, right? Here a year. Here's the beauty. When you get someone a good job and they get in there and figure it out, then they start looking around, and when they see opportunity, they call their people up and they bypass us and get in. So I got more people in the construction trades because now their friend or relative got them in the same way that Swanson, Swinson, and Johnson do it here, our good friends from the Norwegian and Scandinavian communities, right? You start to build those ant trails. So I count on the fact that every graduate that I produce probably influences 2 to 3 people. Their children, people they don't even know they're influencing, and their friends who want to join them. And that's how you affect the change. What was the other part of the question, Tom?
Whether or not you've worked with other people in other cities to replicate the model.
So this is a very difficult thing to do. Because policy we're an accredited post-secondary certificate bearing institution. And when I was on the school board, I watched the trend to 4-year degrees and doing away with all the other stuff. And so these types of things got killed. Then Clinton and Bush came along and put it all in the technical colleges. So community-based organizations that were training got killed in 1998 with welfare reform, which pushed soft skills on employability skills and helped to grow the misery management machine. So it's very difficult to replicate. However, given now the advent of tools like this one, and the move to technology, we can do the virtual thing, and we are looking at ways to export what we do because the environment, the learning environment is changing. So we see the ability now to export our classrooms to different places the same way I'm sitting here in my office in my home and you're around the country or around the globe. I can do this without being a high powered university. So things are coming.
So how would you tell, so we've got a broad range of people here on the call, as I mentioned, but we have a number of faculty, we have students. What would you tell a faculty and students that they should be teaching to create more Lewis Kings? I don't want to put you on the spot, but I mean, I've had the great pleasure of working with you for a long time. I see the kind of influence and impact that you have. What do people need to be taught and to learn and to deliver to bring more people like you to bear on the kind of challenges that you've addressed?
Sure. I am the product of significant investment. Financial aid works. The being a professional soldier gave me a skill set that is immeasurable. I think if you ask me what am I, I've been trained to be a leader. Whether it's an underwater pipe fitting detachment, a cookie circle, I'm going to organize the people, make sure we do what we said we were going to get done. And so leadership training is very, very, very important. And I'm a little disappointed in what now is the vogue around leadership training. I listen to these folks who've never led their shadow coming out saying that they're leaders, right? And they got all these theories, and nobody will follow them. Nobody will follow. So that's very important. Leadership matters. And when you talk about a leader, people do what you do. They follow your example. They got to believe that you care for them. You have to care about the people that you lead. Now, that doesn't mean that you coddle them. You got to make sure they're ready for the fight. And they got to know what you stand for. Tom can tell you, people can tell you what I stand for without me being present. I don't waffle. I don't chase the newest vogue thing because I know that it will come and it will go. Take care of the people, practice leadership, know your craft. I often tell folks a monkey can do the task and a parrot can say the words, but neither understand the underlying principles. And you can't say that you slept at a Holiday Inn Express last night. People are counting on you to get things done. And when you get in that hot seat, you better damn well know your business because people's lives are dependent on it. Do not pretend to be a fireman. You'll get us all killed. Know your craft, take care of the people, stand for what you stand for. Be willing to stand alone. Others will join you.
So Lewis, there are a number of people on this call that want to have an impact, a positive impact on society, right? I mean, that's one of the underlying kind of tenets behind the program that we have at Notre Dame. What would you tell people if you had them in a room and you said, you know what, I'm going to ask you to do this to have a real powerful impact on the community that's important to me? What would you tell them to do?
Find the fight and get in it. Find your fight. Find your fight and get in it. Now, people, and there's people on both sides, right? Let's just be real. The Southerners, the rebels, the Confederacy, they thought they were right. They got in the fight. Choose sides. Pick a side. All right. I'm not gonna try to tell you which side to pick. I know what. If you're not on my side, you're gonna lose. All right. Now I'll tell you that. So choose carefully because there will be consequences for choosing the wrong side. Now, if you want to fall for a commercial because somebody said it, then that's on you. I just laid out to you a very clear history today about why I am where I am, doing what I am in the places that I am. You can't deny it. You can try to deny it. You can try to ignore it, but we're going to keep marching right on over you. So choose a side in the fight and get in it, but do so with discernment. Do so with discernment. And above all, look to the future. We tend to like microwavable things. This is a long haul. I've watched the Soviet Union, Russia, China, African nations. Europe changes boundaries every 50 years or so. All right. I mean, this is real. And then I look at this country, right? It is what it is. We are who we are, and it's our thing. So if you believe you're making this country a better place, do it. Do it with discernment, learn from the history, and keep your eyes focused for the long fight.
So when we think of discernment, we are Notre Dame, right? We bring in a spiritual element oftentimes. Talk about whether or not that in your mind has a role, and whether or not institutions, churches, places like that have a role as you think about discernment and as you think about empowering people to do good things.
Absolutely. So I often ask the racists, the segregationists, how you go to church on Sunday? What God did you pray to? So when you don't want to talk about religion, right? And what preacher's standing up there believing that I'm not a man and we're not human beings? We're praying to the same God? So there's religion. People pick and choose, all right? Why was there a need to form a Catholic university in the middle of nowhere in one of the most conservative places on the planet? Why? People choose on religion. People can skew their values to suit themselves. But you know what? If you look, and this is why I began with the history of Black folks in this country. If you just settle on those 4 points, go get the Guardian. I wanted a quick thumbnail sketch for you. If you really want to ground yourself, right, in something real quick, you look at that. And then what does that tell you? That there's been a steady march, progression going on. And then you got to choose. Which side are you on? And it's okay if you're on the other side. I need you to be Jared Kushner. I relish the other side. It's what makes us great. If you're going to be on the other side, that's fine. But history shows you that we've been on a steady march. This country is on a steady march. And you got to decide whether you're going to fight this thing that eventually going to be overwhelmed, and is that your value system, or do you really believe that God made all of us equal? Do you really believe we the people have inalienable rights? Do you really believe that? And then you choose to do what you feel is right.
So I mentioned religion, and we got a question from Father John in Ohio. So there may be a little bit of providence happening here. I love it. But his comment and question is that I find some of our young men are discouraged because of the been there, done that experiences that they've had. How do we get them to see and be willing to attempt to make this different?
So I go back, I can only lean on what I lean on, right? It is really hard for some people to believe that they'll ever be free. And I offer you this. Not every slave ran, all right? And even when we were running the Underground Railroad, we had to deal with the house slave who had a case of mistaken identity. And then the field slave who was going, if you get away, they're going to beat me worse. And then we got out on the track, and there's a slave catcher. There's people, he's just doing his job. Don't get mad at him. And then there's people who will see you but don't help you. But then there are those who would help you as long as you were running. Later, not every Negro marched. And still now everybody can vote. So we don't need everybody. They will gravitate towards people that they believe in and trust. I have young men who absolutely know that I am in their corner as long as they're trying to be like me. Not do what I say, but do what I do. Um, be a family guy, work, take care of your business. They follow an example. Unfortunately, pop culture has destroyed our identity and redefined us. And that's a fight that we have to take on as big as the fight that we have to take on against the police and the other stuff that's going on. The competent commander can fight on two fronts. Should be capable of doing that. We've been asleep on the second front, but I think the community is waking up and understanding that we got to do something. As I say, take back the black, redefine what it means to be African American. We're not some tatted up gangsters out there doing that thing. We are family people. We are American citizens. We want to work like everybody else. Pop culture did a job on us, but it's going to be all right.
Well, Louis, I hate to say it, but we're getting right to the end of our time. And all I can say, having had the opportunity to be with you in a number of different forums, but I'll harken back to the moment right after the murder of George Floyd when we had a board meeting at Alina. And your point of fighting the good fight from that, right in that meeting, when we had that kind of moment of reflection, the time that we spent, you reminded the institution, which has a major influence in that exact neighborhood, what an influence it has and how it can make a difference. And that to me is kind of, I think, what you mean by fighting the good fight. You didn't back down. You didn't step away. You said, you know what, here's what needs to happen. And it's that spirit and that directness and that influence that I've cherished for many years. So I'll just close by saying thank you for just a wonderful session, Louis. Seriously, since the day I met you, you've been a model of leadership because of the conviction that came through today. I also want to thank our participants for joining us, the great questions and the engagement that they had. And I want to remind everybody that on November 10th, we have our next guest, Father Dan Grudy. Dan has also been, among many other things, and he's somebody, Louis, I'd love to have you have the opportunity to meet, a powerful voice for those who are often unheard, and is a consummate servant leader in his many roles here at Notre Dame, including trustee, university fellow, faculty member, and most importantly, priest. We'll preview this part 7 on ThinkND with a few short primer videos in the coming weeks. Please review and come prepared to engage again. And thank you again, Louis, for just a marvelous session, and a shout out to our audience, and we'll see you all in another couple of weeks for another inspiring conversation. Thanks, Louis.
Thank you. Have a good day.